Well, anytime I wake up, it's a good day. Well, we need people who are considered to be experts, authorities, or whomever to comment, make recommendations in the industry. And that becomes an interesting story on how I became famous. At the age of 30, I left my job at CompuGraphic Corp. I was the first marketing communications manager. And when I hit 30, I said, if I don't go off on my own now, I never will. So I became one of the first consultants to the printing industry, helping people make the transition from hot metal to phototypesetting. But the problem is no one heard of me. So I said to myself, how do you become famous quickly? And I said, all right, how do people refer to you? And I said, okay, Frank Romano, what? Consultant? That doesn't sound that important. How about author? And so I wrote a book called The Handbook of Composition Input. And I got one company to set the type for me, another company to paste it up, another company to print it. And all I wanted out of it were 500 copies. And I wrote a press release. And it said, Frank Romano, noted author. And I sent them to all of the heads of the trade associations, the media, everyone in the industry. And suddenly I started getting phone calls. Could you come and do a speech for us? Could you come and consult for us? So within 6 months, I went from being unknown to being famous. And as a result, I did work for almost every major organization in America, for the federal government, publishing companies, insurance companies, everyone you can possibly imagine. I worked with Rupert Murdoch when he bought the New York Post. I did the National Enquirer and met Generoso Pope, who founded the Enquirer. And I got to know them because I was intimately involved in their business, helping them decide how to make technology work for them. It allowed me to write. And so I wrote up to now 65 books. And I still write for magazines all over the world. I'm on the masthead of a Middle East printer. I still write for magazines in Australia and New Zealand. And so I had a phenomenal body of work. And that's because I've had time to do this. If you went on airplanes, you'd be probably wandering through airports more times than anything else. Keeping my independence has been one of the most important things that I do. If you ever see me quoted by a manufacturer, it's because I really believe what I'm saying about them. But that's it. I don't consult for vendors at all. And in fact, if you go back in time, I'll tell you the reason. iTech had a photo typesetting machine, and I had written an article about how the keyboard should be designed. So they actually hired me to design the keyboard. And by the way, they paid me $50,000. It was a lot of money in those days. It still is, I guess. And then I was in this position where I was hired as a consultant, and I had to pick between two machines. And one was one that I worked on. And I said, how can I be independent? How can I be neutral at this stage of the game? So that's when I essentially said, that's it, no more. And so that allows me to talk to vendors at a whole different level. I can sign non-disclosure agreements. I can hear what they're talking about. I can make comments about what they're doing. But I'm not involved in any way, shape, or form. I'll never forget, I took a tour once of the Scientology printing plant in California, and they heard that I was there, and so they brought an entire film crew in, and they were trying to get me to say something positive about Scientology. That was the hardest job I had. You know, one of my goals when I was teaching at RIT full-time was, if you look at all my books, 2/3 of them have been written with students. And so I would find really talented students, and I would have them collaborate with me on a book, and I would put their name first as the author, so that when they graduated as published authors as such. And there were a few. Peter Muir did a phenomenal job, and I haven't heard from Peter in quite a while, so I don't know what he's doing. But he was certainly on a trajectory that would make him one of those Frank Romano kinds of authorities out there. And so I had him, we used to do many seminars for outsiders at RIT, and I would have him do some sessions for me. And so he would sit through my sessions and then he would do his. Well, one morning I had a meeting and I said, could you do the session that I do? And so I came back early and I'm listening to him speak and he's using all of my jokes. And I said, this young man is going to go far. The photo typesetting industry, there were 40 different machines to choose from. And it was a very complicated area. And so finding someone who had sort of a good view of that industry, what worked and what didn't work, was key to everything. And so that's why people came to me. The only competitors I had were the Siebold organization. And they did gigantic projects. I would do smaller projects for all intents and purposes. In fact, you could hire me to come for a day. I would review everything you're doing. And then at the end of the day, I would sit down in front of your tape recorder and tell you exactly what to do. And by the way, social media has created a phenomenal number. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. It's amazing. We promote the museum through social media, and it's amazing how the numbers keep growing. It's gigantic. You could never do that in print. You can't use any one medium anymore. It's really necessary to do it all. And so again, I go to all the vendor sites. I go and I watch their videos. I watch any press conferences they have that are online. I try to stay informed about the industry, even though I spend most of my time in a museum looking at the past. By the way, I will be at the show in Orlando coming up in October. My feeling is that we have to get back to some degree of normalcy. And I think you need to have that face-to-face. You have to be there to see the machines, to see them running, to see what they do, to talk to the people. I think that's still very necessary. It's a little harder to get up and down. But again, running around the museum keeps me active. The museum is only open on Saturdays to the public, but I will open other days of the week. So right after we're done, I have someone coming in to visit the museum. I have a family coming in, and I'll give them a tour. I know, it's just amazing to have participated in all that change. So I like to tell everybody, my life is now in a museum. And if you have a museum, it's not hoarding. And so, and by the way, we have a lot more than printing presses. There are typesetting machines here, computers, typewriters, mimeograph machines, copying machines, everything involved in reproducing information in some way or shape or form. Plus my library is here. The library has almost 8,000 books in it. The reason we will have printed books is so people can share them with other people. They're not protected in any way. And I buy a lot of antiquarian books. And whenever I buy one, I bought a Bedoni book the other day from 1806. And I said, what if this was an ebook? Would I be paying this much money for an electronic version of this thing? Probably not. So I think printed books will still exist. Again, it will be competitive. We are down about 50% in terms of the number of printers in America from 1995. 1995 was the watershed year for printers in America because that's when the internet really got a face. That was Netscape. And since then, the number of printers is declining. I think we're going to go down a little bit more, and that will be the number of printers to the end of the century.